Okay, well then let's get started. Um, I also wanted to remind everyone or tell everyone that this is being recorded, and our hope is that it'll be a great session and we'll be able to use it, make it available to other people that weren't able to join us tonight. So getting started, we have Scott Elkins, who will provide an overview of the structural assessment and this second round of inquiry. Scott?
Thank you, Debbie. So everybody, I'm going to switch to screen share. So you should now be seeing my screen, which is the beginning slide of the slideshow that we've shared with you all as potential facilitators for group exercises to collect feedback for the structural assessment this round. What I'm going to do is just walk through the early slides, and as I'm doing it, actually talk you through the slides to give you a high-level update and review of what structural assessment is. I hope and believe that many of you are familiar with it, but we also just want to give you a sense of how you might walk through with your teams. And then I'm going to be turning things over to Mark Walters, and he's going to walk through the actual feedback exercise, which is the latter part of the slideshow. We're going to save questions right now, if that's okay with y'all, so we can get through all the material. And at the end, we should have a good 15 minutes or so to go through any questions folks have. So you've got the opening slide, and hopefully you can see there's both the slide and beneath it, there are some speaker notes. So when you open the file that's been shared with you, you should be able to see the speaker notes to read along. If you have a problem opening the file, please just send me an email at scott.elkins@sierraclub.org and I can help troubleshoot for you with that. Session outcomes, this again is not, the slideshow is not designed for this. We're walking you through the slideshow that you'll be able to use and that you have access to. And this is how you can talk through what you'll be doing with your team. This is the section I'm going to cover, just a high-level update and overview of the structural assessment. So we've got some very basic text. It's a one-year project to envision a future for Sierra Club structure that expands our strengths in ways that rise to the opportunities and challenges we face. Our ambition is to move beyond incremental changes to chart a bold, deliberate, and strategic course. The project was initiated at the Board of Directors meeting in early March of 2019, and it's planned to wrap up by May of 2020, at which point we'll be bringing a final proposal for structural change to the board for them to vote on and decide what further action to take. Some people have asked, well, what about implementation? How are you fitting that into this? This part of this work is about the project team that we'll share the roster of the project team with you in a little bit, proposing structural change and collecting input from throughout the Sierra Club to feed into the process to decide what that proposal looks like. We're going to be including a high-level implementation outline for the board to consider as they're deciding what to do. But actual implementation of any structural change would happen after the board vote in May of 2020. And who leads that change and how it's rolled out and managed would be a decision of the board and the executive staff. There's no expectation that this team will continue past May. So the 5 criteria were decided on by the board and were included from the earliest part of this project. And they're really sort of the guiding lights of what it is that we're hoping to accomplish. A couple of people have asked for what is the problem statement that we're addressing. The board's choice was to focus on what it is we want to become and how we want to evolve and what strengths we want to capitalize on, and focus less on outlining a whole bunch of problems. We actually did problem identification in an earlier round of feedback that some of you will be familiar with. But these 5 criteria are those guiding lights of where the board wants us to go. That the structural change should enhance the size and power of the Sierra Club's volunteer grassroots base and our capacity to win the concrete victories. It should help align our work and internal processes with our principles of equity, justice, and inclusion, and cultivating understanding and investment in our staff and volunteers. It should strengthen the capacity and breadth of distributed local volunteer leadership in their pivotal role as both strategic decision makers and grassroots activists. It should streamline decision making and establish new practices, allowing us to increase efficiency and resources for substantive work and reduce the resources required for coordination. Another way to frame that is we want to spend less time meeting to talk about how we don't want to step on each other's toes. And we want to spend more time walking in the same direction to accomplish tasks, if that makes sense, a different way to think about it. And then the fifth criteria is enable us to readily and effectively share the complete story of our work in a state or community to inspire and motivate donors, partners, and our constituents. I read through each of those 5 criteria because in each step of the work, we're trying to keep a really close eye on those. As you're collecting feedback from your team, it's helpful for them to be grounded in these criteria as the sort of thing that we're aiming to accomplish. So the next slide is about other change initiatives. There's, as chapter chairs and as leaders in your group and chapter, I know you're probably all painfully conscious of the amount of change that's happening in the Sierra Club. This is not a piece that's just sitting out there spinning on its own. All of these major change initiatives are connected together, and this graphic is a way to illustrate that. So some of you may have heard about the Clean Energy for All and the program departments restructuring. That's one change initiative. There are organizational values that the board is working with. That's another change initiative. The multi-year equity plan and structural assessment fits in with those. All of them flowing together to form that 2020 to 2030 strategic framework that the board and the Sierra Club Foundation board are working together to put together. We're in conversation, the project team for structural assessment, with leaders for each of these other change initiatives, and really seeking to use both the input we're receiving from teams and individuals through feedback processes like we're talking about tonight, as well as the themes and ideas we're getting from these other change initiatives to continue to narrow the scope of change that we're looking at and putting together that final package that we'll be presenting in May. Next thing, I just want to spend a little bit of time on this structural assessment timeline. That pink arrow points to the phase we're in right now. A number of you help provide information around our problem identification and case for change, and we use that information to develop the insights and the opportunity areas we're going to be talking about and we're soliciting feedback on. Once we've collected that feedback around mid-November, the project team's going to regather in Salt Lake City and construct from that pathfinding ideas. And this is where it's going to get interesting, because these are very specific structural change ideas that we're going to be crafting that seem to fit the opportunity areas that we identify. And we're going to be rolling those pathfinding ideas out in early December as the next round of input that we're going to be requesting from teams, including chapters and groups around the Sierra Club. Third stage in February and March, 3 models for structural change, where we'll be taking certain pathfinding ideas and packaging them together in what we think is a model for what the structure of the Sierra Club could look like going forward. And then we'll narrow those down to a preferred option and propose that to the board in April and May. And again, with those 3 models, we're going to be soliciting input and ideas and using that to help shape the final decision. And then finally, May 20th isn't quite accurate. It's actually May 15th is the board date of action on the recommendation. In the gray box, you'll see what we're doing right now, which is at each stage of the timeline, we're going through where we're collecting, considering feedback and insights from the prior stage, developing work that's rooted in that feedback, sharing that work product with volunteers and staff, in this case, those opportunity areas and insights, soliciting your feedback, and then changing and modifying our work product and finalizing it before we move to the next stage. Final slide here before we go into the actual exercise is the project team members, so you can see who they are. You see Debbie and myself and Mark amongst us. I'll just note for reference, all 3 of us have actually been chapter chairs at one point or another. Mark, I think most recently, and Debbie and I at some point in the past. That's also true of Marian Klaus, one of our other members, who was a former chapter chair from Utah. Two people who you may not recognize at the bottom right, Michael Greger and Alexis Gonzalez Black, are the two consultants from an organization called August Public Incorporated. We selected this consultant through a competitive process. And one of the reasons we picked August Public is their focus and their track record is really around a couple of organizational models called holacracy and sociocracy, which are both similar sort of organization models that root decision-making at the grassroots level. That could be workers on the plant floor in a corporation, or other folks who are out there doing the public-facing work of an organization. But the idea is to drive decision-making down and out in the organization, and we felt that was a good fit with Sierra Club. And between the 8 members, 7, Katie McFadden and Jack Darren share a seat on the project team and have 1 vote. We have over 150 years of collective Sierra Club experience that we bring, and we also represent a wide variety of pathways and experience inside the Sierra Club and outside in lived experience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Walters. I'm going to keep the slideshow up because he's going to walk through these next stages. And Mark, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Scott. So one of the things that I wanted to say up front as we think about each of you who are on this call who will be working with this guide with your teams is that there are a few things that you may want to do in order to prepare for this. I think the facilitator's guide is fairly straightforward, but a little bit of preparation will help. You probably want to read through the request for proposals. That gives you, helps to ground you and then kind of give you a sense for why we're doing this and some of the things that we want to make, that we have been charged with making sure are included in our considerations. We have also made sure to include a printable version of the feedback form, which you may want to have as you're going through this exercise with your team. It just makes it a lot easier. And at the end of your session, then you can either collect them and provide that to, send that in to us. Yes, that's what we'd like for you to do. So let's start off with the work that we're doing and what we are talking about. So based on the feedback that we got from the first round of inquiry, the project team developed these 7 insights, themes around which we felt a lot of folks had concerns and shared feedback and shared their thoughts about what it is that we should be focusing our energies and our time on. We collected input from lots of folks, dozens of teams that shared their insights in June and July about the problems and the solutions that they feel are rooted in the Sierra Club structure. And from this, we crafted we thought of some opportunity areas that we felt if we tackled these, then these may help us to get to a solution to some of these issues and problems with the structure of the Sierra Club. Today, we're looking for feedback, thoughts about the opportunity areas that we have outlined. There are 7 of them. And what we've done is we have taken these insights and crafted 4 or 5 opportunity areas that we felt may help to get us to a solution to some of the issues with this current structure. And I want to say here that the exercise that you'll be running, the exercise that you'll be doing with your team, what we are asking you to do is to actually rank the opportunity areas, the 4 or 5 questions that is included with each of these insights. We want to be sure that these are the right questions that we should be asking. So we're asking you to let us know how you think your rating as far as how you think these specific questions, we call them how might we's. How do they specifically address and resonate with you and your team and your area of the club? We want you to rank each of them, whether they resonate highly or not at all. And that's the primary goal of this, to get some feedback on that aspect. We also want to encourage you that if you think there are questions that we're missing that's not included with any of these insights, feel free to add those. There will be space on the feedback form to add questions that you think we should be considering also. But again, the primary focus of this will be to get your ranking of each of these opportunity areas and where they sit as far as your area is concerned, and how important do you think they are to the work that you're doing. So what I'll do right now is maybe go through each of these, and there's a lot of text, so I won't read I won't read all of this. I'll just go through some of the main ones. The first insight is that we're limiting our ability to grow our movement, achieve our goals, and project power by supporting local entities unevenly, inadequately, and not strategically. And again, all of these were crafted from the feedback that we got from the hundreds of responses and the hundreds of folks who responded to our first round of inquiry. And from this insight, we ask the following questions. How might we define and ensure the minimum level of capacity in each state or territory needed to achieve our goals? And similar questions along that line, which were sparked by this particular insight. If you go to the next one, Scott. The second insight was the ways that our structure has evolved have led to conflict and confusion around priorities, authority, and accountability. We have grown and evolved with a low amount of central control, leading to many forms of misalignment. We experience this as internal competition, divisions between different entities, and unclear roles and responsibilities. And at times, it feels like several different organizations are operating simultaneously, national versus chapter structure, for example. And based on this insight, we have crafted and asked the questions that you see on the right. And again, if you think that there are any questions that we're missing that should be there, let us know. But we want you primarily to let us know how each of these rank with you. The next one, insight number 3, our structure is complex and sometimes obscure. And this has a deep impact on who we include and elevate. And we heard ideas around this from a lot of people, that we have a club of insiders and outsiders, and we want this to be one club, but some folks feel excluded because there's a language, there's a lingo, there is an in crowd, and those who feel excluded end up not participating to their fullest extent, to the fullest capabilities, because they don't feel that they're part of the larger club that some people feel more entrenched in. So we want to make sure that we disrupt some of this kind of the way this is set up, and so we've crafted these questions, the opportunity areas on the right, around disrupting this. How might we make chapter support functions more simple, efficient, and accessible? How might we stop distinguishing between chapter and national? We heard that one a lot. How might we invert the connection of tenure and privilege with positional power? Again, let us know how you feel about each of these questions, whether they are the right one, and how they rank with you and your team. The next one, Scott. Chapter staff and volunteers are deeply connected to local and state issues and priorities. And again, for decades, we recognize that chapters have built relationships at the local level that will be difficult for the national office to foster. And this is the important work that we want to make sure that is happening, and it's specific to the place that they're located. And it's not always tied to a national campaign, and we want to be sure that we are supporting this. And so based on this insight, we wanted to be sure that we are asking certain questions that are going to help us to design the structure that's going to help foster this. How might we connect chapter staff and volunteers to local and state issues prioritized by the communities that are most impacted? How might we increase our power to act on regional issues? How might we center our local entities as Sierra Club's permanent organizing infrastructure? The next one, Scott. And I won't read through all of them, but this is basically what we're asking you to do. Each of these insights will have opportunity areas and questions that we thought were generated organically from these insights, and we're asking your help in making sure that we have the right questions, we're asking the right questions, and that they are relevant to your team and to you and the work that you are doing. Insight number 6, or chapter national structure puts too much administrative burden on volunteers and chapter staff. And then the last one, our work is not connected enough to impacted communities and issues. We have damaged relationships that need to be acknowledged and healed. So these are the 7 insights that we are working with, along with the how might we's that came out of that. And again, we are asking for your help in looking at these questions, letting us know if these are the ones that we should be asking, if there are additional ones that need to be added here, but most importantly, how each of these questions rank, how each of these how might we's rank with your team and the work that you're doing. Then the slides that we're showing here are, if you have additional questions or comments, responses, feedback that you think that may not fit into the format, but which you feel would be helpful to us, please be sure to include them with the feedback. And again, we will continue to send out information. We'll continue to direct folks to our page in Campfire, where you can see the entire work, the list of the work that we've been doing, and catch up on anything that you may have missed. And of course, stay in touch with us. Continue to send us your insights and feedback as we go through this process. All right. So at this point, I think we can open this up for questions or any feedback that folks may have that they may want to share.
Yeah, if people could either raise their hand on the participants list or chat the question in the Zoom group chat, that would help us get going.
Can I ask a question while we're doing that?
Sure can.
I have 2 questions, and I'm sure you guys have given me the answers to both of these, and I've missed it in the blizzard of emails. First is, what is the deadline for us conducting these feedback sessions and getting the feedback back to you?
That's an excellent question, and it's something that I should have mentioned. So we need to have this feedback by November 15th. We are meeting in Salt Lake City the weekend of the 22nd. So we want to have this feedback in time so that we can look at them, evaluate them, assess them at our in-person meeting.
Okay, second question is, if I'm setting up this session with my leadership, how much time should I block out? Is this a 2-hour session,
So
what do you recommend? As you well know, the longer it takes, the less the participation, but you want time to do it effectively.
excellent question, Ken. We recommend anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
I think that's enough time to get through this comfortably.
Great, thank you.
I will say Marion Klaus, one of our team members, led her campaign team through this exercise. She tried to do it in a half hour, and that felt too rushed to her to be able to do it. That was her feedback today. So
Yeah, she's on the call.
It actually took us an hour and 15 minutes.
there you go. Thank you, Marion.
Okay, other questions? I don't see anyone raising. Okay, we do have a hand. This is the woman who has her husband's Connie.
Connie. My name is
Yes.
Connie.
Yes, sorry, I had to look at my
Yeah.
notes.
So can I just verify, I would say on your slideshow, I wish we had the rating slide prior to all the things that we're going to be doing the ratings on, because it's nice to indicate to people with that slide, like this is how you're going to be using your rating system. So I would flip that. And then does it matter how many ones we can give, as many ones in each category or fives? You're not limited to give, to prioritize one thing as a 1, another could be a 2. Is there a limit?
Would you like me to answer some of that?
Sure, go ahead, Marion.
Hi. When I did it with my team, I think it's easiest if you actually print the survey. And if you print the survey, then you have a printed form of all the questions and the options and the comment section. So I just filled that out by hand as we were working our way through it. And then when we were all done, then I went into the electronic survey itself and filled it out. So I think it really helps to have a printed copy of the survey, which you can do from the information we sent. I believe I saw that today, Scott.
So did you have each participant do their own survey, or did you have discussion and come to a group consensus for your chapter that this is our response?
We had a discussion and we came to a close consensus, not an entire consensus in every case. But when I was putting our data into the survey, I found out that you can click on more than one number. So you could have both a 1 and a 2 if your group was divided on which way that should go. So you can put in more than one response, I discovered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The other thing, Connie, I'll just flag is at the bottom of the slide, each of the slides, there are speaker notes. So as you are going through there, we flag at the top of those insights that it's going to be a 1 to 5 rating scale, and encourage people to have those printed out pieces and that sort of thing too. As y'all are going through this, if y'all feel it is really important to move that 1 to 5 rating slide up, we can do that too. I want to get a little more feedback from teams before we do that, but that might make some good sense. So I appreciate that feedback.
Okay, we have a question from Dennis. Dennis, go ahead.
Hi, this is Dennis. I'm Vice Chapter Chair for the Angeles Chapter. And I understand that this is still in construction, but is there a goal as to what the implementation date is as a whole?
So as far as implementation is concerned, that is out of our hands. The project team will not be doing implementation. That is actually the board and the executive team's decision. We have a commitment from the board that there will be implementation of the recommendations, but at this point, we don't know what that timeline will be and how that will happen. We just know that it will.
We also know that there's some budget and some money in the 2020 budget to get that started. Any other?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Marianne.
I was just going to say my response again to Ms. Schmidt. Are you from Illinois? I think I met you.
We
at the
met,
chapter
yes,
assembly.
we met in Pennsylvania. Mhm.
Right, right. The slideshow that Mark took you through with the insight and the how might we questions, those are exactly what you're going to see in the survey that you'll be filling out. And so when you print that out, what I did with my team was just to go through the slideshow, and in each one of those insights, then we ranked the how might we questions from that slideshow. And then I filled out my printed form of the survey, which I then used afterwards to complete the online survey with our team response.
Thanks. Thank
So
you.
that was an efficient way to do it, I think.
Yeah.
And the survey also offers the option of filling this out as an individual or as a team. And at the start of the survey, it actually asks you to decide which it will be. So you can do it as an individual or as a team.
Thanks.
Anne in Michigan.
Yes, thanks. And thanks for the presentation. And all the questions are useful here too. So how will the structural assessment team use this information? Is this it was occurring to me as I've gone through the insights that I wasn't clear on whether this was based on the majority, the largest vote getters, or if it was seeking a range of issues. And I sort of have the same question for you. Are you going to be weighing these based on the number of responses, or is there some other criteria that you'll be looking for?
That is a good question. We will be looking at the number of responses to each of those questions, but we'll also look at the teams that they're coming from and which of the specific insights they feel are most relevant to them. So we'll be using a range of criteria. I don't think we have hashed all of that out yet, but yes, we'll be using a range of criteria to assess the feedback we get to make sure that we are actually addressing the right ones.
And we're also going to be using the open form responses. If people suggest something we may have missed, that might end up getting into the mix as well. Okay, we have, Connie, did you have another question?
No.
Okay, then we have two people who are down as admin. So would one of them ask their question?
Hi, this is Emmy in Los Angeles. My question is, what is the relationship of the exercise with the slideshow and the survey? Is the slideshow just a priming activity for filling out the survey, or is it an opportunity to jointly fill out the survey? I'm a bit confused. Thanks.
So the idea behind this, the slideshow, is to give you the full list of insights and how might we, or the questions that we feel may help us to get to a structure. And what we are asking folks to do is to look at the questions, give us feedback as far as whether or not these are the right questions that we should be asking, if there are additional ones that should be added. And then for the questions that are in the survey, rank them. Tell us how important each of these questions are to your team, and whether or not these questions address issues that you're having with your issues in the club that directly affect your team, let us know exactly how, you know, where they rank for you and your team. So the slideshow is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How does one give feedback? Maybe I think I'm missing something really basic here. How does one give feedback based on the survey, on the slideshow? About
So the
saying
slide,
thinks these are not the right questions or whatever, or they're great questions. How does one give that feedback?
so the feedback we're asking for is to look at each of those insights and the opportunity areas that are associated with each of those insights, and then tell us if these are, tell us how important each of those questions are to your team, whether these questions are most important or least important, which ones they are. And then if there are questions that you feel are missing that should be there, that you think are relevant to your team, then you know, let us know. There is a space on the feedback form that you can include those questions.
Mark, maybe I'll also just do a screen share of the facilitator guide, which is the document where the slideshow is linked from. That also includes a link to the online survey where you'll actually be submitting your responses. I don't know if that's part of your question as well or not, but I'll screen share that facilitator guide so you can see the materials that we have linked from there.
Yeah, that's helpful, I think.
One moment.
Okay, we'll let Scott get that up.
Right down here, if you can see my mouse, I don't know if you can, but post meeting, you can go to this link and that will take you to your input form.
And
So
a
the
cop,
the
Go ahead.
input form is basically the survey.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
we have Don Ferber next.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all the work on this. I know it's a lot. It's more of a comment than a question, but it sort of occurred to me in looking through some of this that there's a tension between some of the different goals. I mean, just like democracy is kind of messy. You know, on the one hand, if you want consistency and you want, you know, one club with everybody speaking with the same voice, it's a real challenge. When on the other hand, you're trying to empower people at a very local level and voices that are not necessarily as attuned to the Sierra Club, but we're trying to honor their path and what they have to contribute. And so I don't know if it's worth putting in any sort of something about that and to extra people to talk about the trade-offs on those issues, because I think that's part of what we're going to be dealing with here. So just a thought to put out there and see if you have any comments about that, or if you think we'll include something on that.
Okay, we're getting a bit of an echo.
I think that's Dennis. Dennis, in your car, if you could mute your line. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll go to you next, Dennis, after we answer this question. Who wants to take that?
So if I understand correctly, the idea is to make sure that we flag that it's inherent in the club structure that there's going to be tension between allowing folks the latitude to, you know, come up with creative ideas about addressing, you know, issues, problems in their locale, while at the same time having some level of control that seem to come from national. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's a wide-ranging area, but yeah, I think, Mark, you're basically on track here with what I'm trying to say. I wonder if it might be useful to have people discuss what they see as the trade-offs and how they feel about them. You know, so get more clarity on that, which I think is going to be sort of a core part of what we're going to be dealing with there at certain points.
Right. I totally agree, and I think a lot of us recognize that it's part of the strength of the club that we're able to have such a diffused network where folks are able to to make decisions locally and have a certain level of autonomy. But it also is can be a challenge, because that also, you know, comes with risk. And one of the, and as a large organization, the club has to figure out a way to manage its risk. And so there's always going to be that tension. I don't know yet how we'll best address that, but I think we're making sure that we're pointing that out so folks are aware that yes, there is going to be a challenge and there has to be some trade-off. You know, and we have to be aware that there are some things that we may end up losing, but we should gain more if we do this right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an inherent tension. I guess I didn't really see it clearly stated that we want to draw that out more. I don't know if it's useful to have people explicitly talk to that. That might help glean more information about, you know, why they're thinking things or what the insights are.
Right.
Don,
Yeah.
you might with your team just include that in the free and form feedback. I don't know if we're going to be able to make that change in the survey as it is, since we've got it pretty well structured at this point. But further down the line, that could be something we could explore if we hear from a lot of folks that they want to hear that more specific conversation as well.
Right, and I don't know.
The one other thing I just wanted to share with everybody is that form can be used for both team and individual feedback. So if there's something that you or a member of your team really wants to put in, but the team as a whole isn't really behind it, submit an individual response as well. We welcome that.
No, I appreciate that, Scott. I was just thinking not to change the survey necessarily, but to just add that as a point to think about. That was all.
Okay.
Good point. Dennis?
Hi. At what point should we consider training other leaders regarding once the assessment has been completed? Should we start now with the materials that we're getting now as to prepare them, or wait till everything has been set in stone to start training our leaders?
So as far as the materials for this round of inquiry is concerned, they are set pretty much, so you can get started. One of the reasons why we are providing as much time as we are at this point is that we got feedback that based on the chapters and groups schedule, as far as when they have their meetings, we needed to get this out at least 2 months ahead to make sure that, you know, at least one meeting occurs during that time. Some groups meet quarterly, and so we may not be getting to everyone. But yes, the material is ready. If you feel comfortable with going ahead with working with your team, please do so. And if you need assistance or any help in going through it, you can reach out to us at on the structural assessment team, and we could help you with that.
We also have materials for Spanish speakers as well.
Great, thank you.
If I could jump in here a second also. We actually intend, certainly in the Angeles chapter, that all of our committees and our regional groups have been notified about the structural assessment. They have the information, and we really hope that they will engage in responding to this now. And I think that's indicative of a number of the Angeles chapter members are on this call.
Excellent, excellent.
Any other questions? There's nothing in the chat, and I don't see any new hands raised. Well, one thing we did find out today is over 20 people have responded to the discussion and survey thus far. So even at this early date in October, we're getting some nice, thoughtful insight as groups and individuals sit down to talk about this. Okay.
So I trust that everyone feel well trained and empowered and quite comfortable with taking their teams through this exercise, and we'll be getting lots of thoughtful, insightful feedback over the next few weeks.
I'd like to thank you all for providing the printable copy of the survey and the printable copy of the facilitator's guide. I think it will help tremendously.
Oh,
Absolutely. We actually had a conversation with Anne and Mark last week, I think, and it was one of the first things they pointed out, that it would be helpful if we had printed copies to make sure that folks could follow along as we are going through the survey. So yes, thank you.
Right, and thanks for setting up this session as well, I think. And I want to thank the more than 20 people who joined tonight too. I know, you were dying to spend the whole time at the debate, but we took you away from that to do this exciting process. But thanks, Mark, Debbie, Scott, and Marion for leading us through this. And I'm sure you'll have additional questions, but I think you've given us a good sense of how to direct those.
yes. And if you have any questions or you'd like to have a project team member join you when you hold your discussion, please reach out to Scott Elkins. And as has been mentioned, the responses are due by November 15th.
Thank you.
Thank you.